there was a time when the Democrats controlled the House here in Kentucky.
Exactly.
But those days are gone, and now the people control the House. This is Frank Simon, and we're here with another program of the rest of the news. Our special guest today is Ed Holloway, a former state representative. Good to have you with us, Ed. And our special guest is Mr. Dave Horowitz, and he's going to be talking about his outstanding book, The Big Agenda. Somebody sent me a copy of your program with Jim Baker a couple of days ago, and I thought that was really terrific. You mentioned about Detroit and what has happened to that. Would you repeat that for us?
Well, yeah, one chapter in my book, Big Agenda, Trump's Plan to Save America, is called The Achilles Heel
Yes.
of the Democratic Party. Democrats control every inner city in America of any size, every killing field, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, Ferguson, Baltimore. They're all 100% controlled by the Democratic Party, and have been for 50 to 100 years.
Yes.
Everything that's wrong with the inner cities of America, every injustice, every so-called oppression, Democrats and progressives are 100% responsible for. And Detroit is their model city. In 1961, when the Democrats took control of Detroit, it was the richest city in America per capita. It was the industrial jewel of the United States. And 50 and more years of Democratic rule has ruined Detroit. And 2/3 of the population have fled. It's so bad. Poverty rates are off the charts. It's like a bombed-out city. I understand it is sort of recovery. But the ruination of Detroit is why you don't want Democrats in power anywhere. And Trump, God bless him, is very blunt in saying so. He's the only Republican who would look Hillary Clinton in the eye and say, "You're a liar and a crook," even though she's both.
Here in Louisville, we've got a mayor, Mayor Fisher, who wants to make Louisville a sanctuary city.
He should be arrested.
Yeah, he should be arrested.
That's sedition. It's the federal law. It's our sovereignty. It's the protection of the nation.
Yes.
All the 500,000 and more illegal aliens who have committed felonies are on the heads of Democrats like your mayor. They're violating the law. They should be prosecuted. I think lawlessness is a Central American problem now. It's okay to shoot police or to incite violence against them. It's okay to incite violence against Republicans, call them racist, sexist, homophobes, Islamophobes, wipe them off the face of the earth. That's the Democratic mantra. That's what the Democrats are united behind. And they're in resistance to a duly elected president. How anti-American is that?
Right.
Our whole system is based on settling things through elections. And when the elections are over, it's a common president. You don't try to impeach him on day one.
We're collecting signatures on a petition to hand into the Metro Council here in Louisville. And I just wanted to mention a phone number here, 893-2444. And we'll send our listeners a free petition. They can call right now and leave their name, address, and phone number on the answering machine, and we'll get one right out to them Monday. 893-2444. Well, that seems to me an example of what you were talking about, Mr. Horowitz, about the Democrats' policies are destroying our inner cities.
And our country. You can't have a country without borders. No other country in the world has an open borders movement like this one. That's spearheaded by the major opposition party. There is none. It's lunacy.
David, this is Ed Holloway. I've got the same thing. I've been watching it. I've been personally involved for over 50 years and watched the city's decline. I watched the inner city of Louisville. I watched it for one time. It was once larger than Atlanta. and a lot of other things, and it's all going downhill because of the Democratic leadership that's been there. I can't keep from thinking about the statement that Nikita Khrushchev said one time. We can't expect the American people to jump into capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving them small doses of socialism until they awake one day and find that they have communism. And that's the same man that helped Stalin murder hundreds of thousands of political opponents in Russia.
I agree. And it begins with our schools.
Right.
You got universities in Louisville, which are indoctrination and recruitment centers for the left.
Well, what you're doing...
You probably have a Republican legislature.
Yes.
You should go to your appropriations chair, the chairman of the appropriations committee, and tell him to do something about these universities.
We read that in your book, and we've got...
Yes, it's in my book, Big Agenda. Diversity. How about intellectual and political diversity? They purged conservatives from the faculties. They don't assign conservative books or Republican books in the classroom, only leftist books. An appropriations chair can pick up the phone to the president of Louisville and say, change this, or I'm going to put my thumb on your oxygen tube.
Let me ask you another question.
No, the big question is, why don't Republicans do that? The only Republican who's a real fighter, well, now there are several, but the only true fighter was Trump.
Yes.
That's why he won. Because people are fed up with Republicans rolling over for the Democrats. I have to make an exception there also for Cruz and Scott Walker. They're also fighters. They talk, particularly Walker. I like Walker a lot.
Yeah.
But he's too mild in his political speech. He speaks softly. He does carry a big stick, which is good. But Republicans need to speak loudly now.
Right. We've got a person working on the legislature to tell them about the one-sided agenda that the university has in Louisville and Kentucky.
Right down to the K-12 schools, because the schools of education are the most left-wing parts of the university. And they just teach indoctrination. Yeah, in my book, Big Agenda, I discuss this, and I discuss it. What you need is a code of ethics for K-12 teachers that they won't advocate on any side of a controversial issue. I've drawn up one. It's on the web. The main thing is that rank-and-file Republicans have to get active and push their representatives to be aggressive and do something while we have the opportunity.
It seems to me that the Democratic Party wasn't always against America like it is now, but they've changed, haven't they?
Started with the McGovern campaign. It's been going on for a very long time.
Ed Holloway, Mr. Horowitz, I wanted to ask you one question. I was very impressed with your section of the book that talked about who funds the radical left in America today.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what I wrote. The left is funded. It's funded by the federal government. I wrote a whole book on this subject called The New Leviathan. These tax-exempt foundations, like Ford and Rockefeller, these are all left-wing foundations. The left outfunds the right by a factor of 10 to 13 to 1, as much as 13 to 1. And on issues like borders, there are these tax-exempt 501c3s that outfund the conservative pro-borders tax-exempt foundations by 1,000 to 1. We have a very unfair balance of power here, which our tax laws make possible. To provide, take the more famous figures, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. They have tax-exempt foundations, yet they're totally political, which is forbidden under the tax-exempt foundation laws. In the case of Sharpton, he should be in jail, shouldn't he, for a tax evasion? Instead, he was the most frequent visitor to the Obama White House and the point man on race relations, a racist, no less. I think conservatives have been, it's not so much asleep as they try not to pay too much attention to the political wars for the last 30 years. That began to change with Obama. They didn't realize how sinister the progressive movement was. It's a racist movement. It's an anti-American movement. It lends aid and comfort to the terrorists. It needs to be opposed at the grassroots level. But until Obama, there was no real grassroots conservative movement, political movement. The pro-life movement probably qualified, but it was confined to that issue until the emergence of the Tea Party, which is very, very recent. So we have a lot of ground to gain. This book I wrote, Big Agenda, President Trump's Plan to Save America, is really a guide to the battle, how to fight it, who the enemy is, and how to combat them. And you can get it on Amazon or in any Barnes & Noble or at my website at frontpagemagazine.com or at thejimbakershow.com.
We got 10 copies, so they can call our office. We'd be able to get them one, too. That's 893-2444. That's area code 502.
David, you're exactly right. I've been watching this, like you was mentioning, over the years, and I watched the Students for a Democratic Society decide that their protests, their sit-ins, their weathermen wasn't working. They were going to have to work from the inside, and they've been doing it ever since. And you mentioned the foundations. I've watched the board members switch from conservatives to they've constantly replaced every one of them with extremely progressive liberals that have destroyed everything that the foundation was originally started for. What you've done with the Students for Academic Freedom is extremely important. I've watched it from grade schools all the way through. And the legislature in Kentucky, for the first time in over 90 years, we have a Republican House, and they've done a tremendous amount in the very short time since January. We need to support them, but the people are just now starting to wake up, and it's people like you and your book and other things that have helped it to generate the kind of things that people have been frustrated. It's been growing like a cancer.
I felt like a voice crying in the wilderness for about 25 years on the right.
Exactly.
And it's not that people sort of didn't agree with me, but they were too well-mannered to attack. The political wars are very dirty, unfortunately. And I think conservatives, that's a healthy attitude to try to stay away from them. But while you're staying away from them, the left is marching and taking over everything. For example, the inner cities. What's the matter with Republicans? They're too polite to mention that the Democrats are racist. Anyway, that's what I like about Trump. He's not too polite.
Right. Here's a phrase that says limousine liberals. It talks about the Ford Foundation and the Heinz Endowment.
They all should be, it's called sunsetting.
Yeah.
Why at the foundation? The Ford Foundation board is responsible to no one. It replaces its own members. It has no accountability, and yet it has more discretionary funds than the federal government. It's a $12 billion foundation, but all its monies what they do is they fund these left-wing projects, and then they get the government to fund them. The government always has restraints and strings attached. But Ford and Heinz, I've got a website called discoverthenetworks.org. And if you look under funders, you can see how gigantic, it's over $100 billion for basically communist agendas. And I say that as the son of card-carrying members of the Communist Party. I had to break free from the left. That's their agenda. It's exactly what Khrushchev said.
Well, do you think if people boycotted Ford Motor Company cars and Heinz ketchup?
No. Ford Motor Company has nothing to do with the Ford Foundation. Disconnected from Ford many years ago.
Okay.
So it's a self-perpetuating board. The government has to just say, okay, you've had enough charitable giving, or if you're going to give to hospitals, that's okay. But you're going to give to political causes, we're going to shut you down.
There was an article in the Wall Street Journal.
What people have to do is get involved with the Tea Party, get involved with your local Republican Party, push them to the right, push them to be aggressive, get involved in fights for your local school boards. Find out what your kids are being told in their classrooms and protest if it's bad.
This ad says that Adobe and Apple and a number of these organizations, Hewlett Packard, are contributing to, that ad was to oppose global warming. But do you think those are funding the left also?
Well, the Hewlett Packard Foundation definitely is. Yeah, probably. The IRS should distinguish charities, which give to everyone. You go to a hospital, they don't ask you what your politics are yet. So that's a charity. But if you're giving to Planned Parenthood, which spends whatever it's $100 million on political ads against Republicans, that's not a charity. I mean, it's a bad organization anyway, what it does on the abortion fund. But
yes.
It's also very political, and they shouldn't be getting any tax-exempt money or any money from the government, for that matter. Those are fights that you need to have.
Okay, we want to promote this book, Big Agenda, by David Horowitz. This book by David Horowitz is a tremendous book. Another thing, it says that following the murder of 5 police officers in Dallas, Texas, during a Black Lives Matter protest, President Obama invited its leaders to the White House. We're up against a lot of problems.
In that case, he's funded by Soros and others who've given millions of dollars to support that kind of rhetoric. But the thing I'm concerned with, and the Horowitz, what you've covered in your book is extremely important, and that is the bureaucracy that exists in all the agencies of government. And I've watched it over the years. When enabling legislation is so general, they leave it up to the agencies to create all of the changes that are necessary, and they take over that thing. Watched it, and going all the way back to Nixon, when he got very upset with one of the agencies and went there and said he was going to clean house. And they laughed at him and told him, we were here before you got here, we'll be here after you've gone. And that's the thing that's really happened. And Obama spent the last part of his administration making sure he appointed his people to the various agencies and the various bureaucracies. And that's part of the things that President Trump is having to fight, is that deep state that exists there. And they're trying to unscramble those eggs that have been created by those bureaucracies.
I was reading about deep state. That refers to like Obama personnel that are still left over. In this book, there's another part that says they investigated the professors at a number of universities, and they found that at least in certain departments, there were no Republican professors, that there used to be, but they kicked all the Republicans out. There ought to be some balance in these professors that are on the tax payroll.
Again, but they have tenure, and this is the thing that had been part of this, what I call the cancer that's been growing, and they slowly inject themselves, and they make sure they get rid of all their opponents. They have complete control. What we've been witnessing at the University of Louisville, for example, with the foundation. I mean, it's probably one of the most corrupt agencies anywhere, but it's been a slow process that built up over time. And once you give somebody a blank check and all of those things, they take advantage of it, and it grows. And I talked to a number of police officers over the years about various issues, and they said the one thing that makes them able to catch criminals is that they get away with it several times, and each time they do, they get more careless until eventually they think, I'm untouchable.
They've been doing this for years with the creation science in the biology departments. If you believe in God, well, they're going to fire you right off the bat.
Well, when you have professors that actually say to their students, if you're a conservative, you don't need to be in this class, get out.
Right. So it's time for a change. Here's another point that Mr. Horowitz was making, is that these tax-exempt organizations are more than 10 to 1.
They're using the 501c3 tax-exempt status as the cover for that. And again, it's been that infiltration and takeover. And it's the same thing that's happened from elementary schools all the way through the universities. And students are given diplomas they can't even read.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a problem because they have none of the fundamentals of education, mathematics, or any of the other things that are necessary for survival and a successful life.
He goes into the Democrat Party quite a bit in this book. And he says, regardless of what it was 20 years ago, that it's now become a party of elitists. Harvard graduates, Apple and Microsoft, and these big wealthy companies have more or less taken over the Democrat Party. Hollywood, Manhattan, much of the media is involved in the left-wing movement. He says big business like Goldman Sachs and many of the rich bankers are also part of this left-wing movement that have taken over the Democrat Party. Things are changing all the time.
Right, and it's been a slow process, and that's what people normally, average American looks at and says, oh, they wouldn't do that.
Horowitz' book, Big Agenda, he's saying that things are politically changing a lot, that the Democrat Party has now become the party of the rich, the party of the big bankers, the party that, is in collusion with the government and getting big bailouts and all of this. And they're trying to pass all of these NAFTA bills and work with China and all these trade agreements. And the Republicans are now the party of the working man.
Exactly.
And he's trying to get jobs. He's trying to lower the taxes. And so really, things have been totally turned around.
Well, what they've had happen, and this again was that slow process over the years, they have slowly taken over what we once knew as the Democratic Party. In that, they've taken over every one of the local Democratic organizations all the way to the Democratic National Committee.
Yeah.
And the people that are elected to the National Committee are part of the progressive movement.
Yeah.
So you get that. And then they create a lie, they spread the lie, they fail to check the lie, and then they deny that they were ever behind it. And so all of those things about the rich this and the rich that, it's been a part of their agenda from a long, long time. We mentioned earlier, we talked about the fact that we've got a Republican House in the Kentucky legislature for the first time in over 90 years.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that they will be up for election in 2018. The Democratic agenda is to break that up and go back in complete control. And this is important because what they've been able to do in a short period of time, everything from right to work to some of the other things that they've done, is very, very important. And to break up some of these bureaucratic structures that are operating in Kentucky, it's a very difficult process. John Y. Brown, when he was governor, he had his thing was that it's a state run by a business, and he was going to run it that way. He got rid of little over 2,000 employees in the state government. They filed suit, and 2 years later, they were all reinstated with back pay. And this is the kind of problems that they're going to be facing, and they're going to be fighting. And from what I've talked to and some of the leadership in the Republican House, they're doing everything they can. It's a slow process. The important thing is to make sure they're reelected next November in 2018.
Well, it seems like this new government that we got this year is working for the little man. He's getting jobs. Because of more and more jobs, we're getting more and more people making money and enjoying the American dream because they've gone back to work.
This is one of the agendas that Trump has had from the very beginning, and it's working, but it's a slow process, and at the same time, you've got more and more people fighting against it.
Yes, caller.
Yes, this is Chris. How you doing, Frank?
Good.
This is a great topic, and I like to guess, and it was good to hear David Horowitz. I lived in big cities, and I've seen what the destruction of Democrats have done. They made, they run people out of the towns, and they loot the taxpayers. They can't have more restriction on jobs, and then the people just want to move out. I have friends in New York City, even too. So look what happened to the South Bronx in the 70s and 80s because the Democrat Party looted all the businesses, taxation, and just bankrupted everything they can do. And this has happened in Detroit, like you said.
Yeah.
We need to, as people, to get behind Trump. Work with the good people up there. These are public servants, but these, there's always the term they used to say in Chicago, the Democratic mafia hitmen up there are looting you with your money, the taxes.
Yeah.
I always used to hear that term up there. But let's really work with Trump. It's going to take us, the people, to do this. Yeah, you're right. There's going to be the people fighting against this. You've got the Black Lives Matter. You've got the Illuminati, the Bilderberg Group under George Soros, or the New World Order.
Yeah.
This has all got to get the word out, and then if we get more people out here to come together in your community, your state and county, including Governor Bevin, we can really turn this country around. But he can't do it alone. It's going to take us.
That's right, Chris. I appreciate you calling. Jobs, they raise the taxes to the point that nobody can pay them anymore, so they move out of the town. And their property taxes is through the roof. And so the people are like, hey, I can't pay these property. So they leave the house, they leave the city, they leave their job, and they just have to leave because they've been driven out of town by these high Democrat taxes. They think, oh, well, if we could just tax, it would solve all the problem. But really, it creates the problem.
It certainly does, and we've seen it with the housing project with Cabrini Green. Thank God it's gone up there in Chicago. But yeah, that's the destructive of what it does to people, and that's not what the American dream's about. It's about independence and freedom, and let us have our dreams and live and have families.
Right. That's exactly right. Policies of the Democrat parties has destroyed the cities, and they're trying to destroy the rest of the country just like they did the cities.
Exactly. They sure have. And we need a new mayor here in Louisville, too. So
yeah. Well, he wants to make Louisville a sanctuary city. Okay, Chris, thanks for calling.
Thank you, Frank. God bless you.
God bless you.
Well, this is the main thing, is what's happening. And if you're exactly right on the number of people leaving the cities, and others create that vacuum. At the same time, we got over 13% of our population, Jefferson County, are now immigrants. And there's a lot of them that we're subsidizing, in fact, with housing, with food, with clothing, and other things. And in the medical community, I talked to a doctor who was in the emergency room at the University Hospital. He was talking about the number of gun wounds and other things that are happening and coming in there, and the tremendous cost.
Yes.
Some of these in intensive care runs over $1 million.
Yeah.
And it's not paid by anybody except the taxpayer. You and I and others.
The other side of that same coin is they won't allow any Christians into America.
Exactly.
They want nothing but Muslims in here.
And they are creating all through the Middle East all the attacks on what they call the infidels, the beheadings and everything else, and destroying Christian items that have been there for hundreds and in some cases thousands of years. Churches and other symbols of Christianity are being destroyed. We can't talk about it because of diversity and political correctness and all the other things. But it is a horrible thing that's happening everywhere else. And then we're not doing a thing about it.
Well, here's Obama. He's put millions and millions of dollars into the so-called Muslim good guys who turned out to be ISIS. And they're going out, blowing up all the churches and murdering all the Christian people. And God bless you. We'll see you again next week for the rest of the news.